What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Outfielder podcast, episode 123, presented by Sensibly Loud Media. I am your host, J-Mac, a.k.a. Founder Numero Uno, and I'm joined by my co-host, Mr. Popfly himself, Founder Numero Dos, Ben.
We're not here to talk about the holes.
Baseball, Ben, what's going on, man?
What a remarkable drop.
It's one of my favorites. That was one of my favorite conversations we've ever had in general. Like, that was just absurd.
What were we talking about?
So that was on it was in the numbers, like number-wise, was in the 60s.
Was this when I was doing the renovation in the backyard?
It was, and we were doing the Red Sox live watch World Series, which didn't exactly make a ton of sense in podcast form at the time. But we went back and edited everything and just took some of the long baseball watching pauses out of it. And some of it's just the best content we've ever come up with because
love it.
We asked you, we just sat there and quizzed you about digging all these holes in your backyard and no one knew why or what was going on. It was fantastic.
And you know what? If you ask me again, it'll still be a different reason. Who knows? Hello, J-Mac. How are you on episode 123?
I am well. 123. Pretty incredible, right?
Yeah. I also love the timing that the instant the intro music starts is whenever your cat Penny tries to get in your back window. And I always see her. We could do pre-show for 30 minutes. She won't do a darn thing. But the instant that snare drum hits, there's Penny.
Yep. She wants to come in every single time. I don't think that's changed since the first episode of this show.
No, not at all. The location has changed. The behaviors of our pets has not. Not unlike us.
Indeed. Well, the great Sambino is out this week, getting a little bit of R&R, I suppose, after his bee sting incident last week. Did you hear about that since you were out?
Just bits and pieces. Yeah, not good.
So he got stung by a bee, and then a week before that, I got stung by a wasp in the Achilles tendon.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a really targeted wasp sting.
I thought so too, and I was very annoyed by it. I felt like that was a very southern kind of problem to happen. Is that pretty accurate?
Probably. Did you know I'm allergic to bees?
I did not. That's good to know, though.
Caveat, I might be. And not in the way to where everyone may or may not be if they don't know. So for those that are just now joining us, hi, Ben Baseball. Good to be here. I have a twin brother. And one of us, when we were younger, was stung by a bee. And my parents don't remember which one it was or who had who had to go to the ER. One of us has a really bad allergy to bee stings, but they don't know which twin it was. It was 30 years ago, and no one knows where the medical records are. So
So a couple of things here. Number one, I am grossly upset at the loss of medical records here.
Dude, small town Nebraska, not a lot going on.
Good point. Secondly, though, the fact that you guys haven't, between two of you, figured it out in 30 years is pretty impressive.
Thank you. I've been stung by wasps and poisonous spider bites and all that garbage, but knock on wood, for the last since one of us got stung 30 years ago, hasn't happened again.
So I know that Duster Dan is not local to us. And I meant to tell you this the other day. I was just browsing Instagram or something like that, and I saw a video of a friend of mine who was having someone help her change a tire.
Okay.
And I literally watched this video no less than 10 times because I really thought it could have been you.
That's perfect.
Have you changed any tires lately?
No, I haven't.
All right, so it wasn't you. Well, I'm glad I didn't ask then.
That's fine. You know what? You did in a public forum, which is the best way to do it.
Right. That's kind of how I thought. I figured, you know what? Maybe she'll listen to the show and, we'll all be on the same page and she'll have a shout out here. Who knows?
Speaking of outfielder mysteries, has anyone won the contest of sending us a picture of your cutout in Oakland Stadium?
So I know that you didn't get to the end of the show last week because I did it specifically at the end of the show. I indicted our listeners pretty hard because I was very pissed off that I didn't get any submissions.
Well, to quote Arrested Development, there are dozens of them.
No, there are more than dozens of them. I'm well aware of this, number one. And number two, I got a lot of pictures that didn't really deserve to be shown. And I want to show show you one of them as usual. And this is where once again, it benefits to watch the show on YouTube versus the podcast form. But I want to zoom in here for just a moment. This guy here seems to be looking like Rafi from the league.
Yeah, that's a good not Justin.
Yeah, this very strange grandmother head that was definitely photoshopped onto some kind, like somehow it was photoshopped onto like a teenage body. Look at that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just, the submissions haven't been great. So, I'm a little miffed by that, to be honest with you.
You know what? Poor submissions are better than no submissions.
It's a good point.
It's just like pizza. Even if you have bad pizza, at least you had pizza.
Exactly. Didn't we just have this discussion about whether we've had bad pizza before or not?
We've had a lot of discussions, and I don't remember many of them. Through no fault of either of us.
Correct. I'm pretty sure this was like recently, and I'm pretty sure Sam had fancy pizza or something that we didn't.
Yes. Brick oven filet mignon strips or something. I don't know.
Yeah. Just
100%.
Nice and fancy. When you don't have the sound clip ready, you just make one up on your own.
Well, that's my favorite part is we have the capability to do drops, yet we still choose to sing them sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, you've got absolutely outlandishly long and stupid theme songs, and then we just decide to not put in effort to find fancy music drops. But maybe I'll add that to the list. We'll see.
It makes sense. Well, what's nice is the effort that we didn't put into finding drops. You know what we did put into?
Baseball.
Talking baseball, MFers. You all ready for this?
Ready.
Perfect. Where do you want to start?
So we had trade deadline today.
Today.
So, okay, let's zoom out here for a second and talk about that first. I absolutely love the 60-game season.
It's not going to lie. It's growing on me because it's so much more competitive and it changes so quickly.
It does. I'll say there's nothing at all that is fair about it, and it's going to put out the best team at the end. I'll say that because, like, you look at teams like the Yankees who are just absolutely devastated with injury, and it's like, oh man, like that should have been a juggernaut team, and you think in a longer span they could work. You just have those ebbs and flows, and it works out. I saw going into the trade deadline today that the Rays have 10 pitchers on the DL or the IL, excuse me.
I believe it. And to be fair to the Yankees, they're 3.5 back they're the wild card team right now. They're 3.5 back of Tampa. Still, the 5.94 winning percentage, not a bad look. Like, still, I'd rather have that than where the Rangers are at.
For sure. It's a garbage division overall, though.
And who do we get to thank for that?
Me, and I'm fine with it. I'm absolutely fine with it. I will take the recognition where I can get it. But it's been a weird season. I haven't tried in fantasy baseball other than to build for the following season. So there's that. But it's been strange. I've enjoyed watching it though, and I think, like, what do you think of the whole? Have you seen much of the extra innings with the runner starting on second thing?
No, I've seen just little bits of it. It's really makes it more electric. Like it amps it up that much more. And at first, when I heard the idea, I thought this was going to be kind of dumb, but no, like it just adds such an extra layer of excitement.
I agree, and I think do you think it's here to stay? I don't know about that.
I think it depends on how the playoffs go.
Yeah. And
how, like, what it does to playoff games, and that will determine it.
That's a very good point. I haven't thought about that, but that's a very good point because it does come down to being one of those things where it can make a significant difference in the game.
Right.
And you have to take that into consideration whenever you're changing major rules and stuff like that, which is exactly why, aside from not wanting to change because of quote unquote tradition, that they've struggled in the past to implement change to baseball for that exact reason, because it can play a heavy hand and put a thumb on a scale where you don't necessarily anticipate. But
right.
I think also that at the same time, though, like to argue the other side of that point there, like you have to, like, teams are going to find ways to work around it regardless. So it doesn't really matter. Everybody's going to figure it out.
Yeah, and no, you're absolutely right. The competitive advantage, it does cut across rather evenly. But I mean, you're also right about how it could tip the scales. Because if I'd have told you before COVID happened that on August 31st, San Diego would be in second place in the NL West, you would have thought I was nuts.
Yeah, probably so. Well, we knew they were building something there, and we'll get into the deadline deals and everything here in a bit, because that's definitely worth talking about, because they strengthened their team big time here today, over the last couple of days, really. But I do think it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out throughout the playoffs. Now, one thing I will tell you that I do think is probably going to be here to stay in some way, shape, or form is the universal DH. Yeah. And it still does throw me whenever I hear things like, the Padres did a good job of strengthening up at DH.
So weird,
man. So weird, but I love it. And it makes sense for teams that are built around superstars like that.
Yeah, and it makes me wonder too, like, if this was how weird it was in the 90s when, like, the Brewers changed from the AL to NL and the Astros switched over. Like, I mean, there's just those weird little things. The Astros switched over in, like, 08 or 09, but still, just those weird where, like, oh, I guess this is something else we need to get used to.
Yeah, and it just becomes like anything else, and it just, people deal with it. And just, what, like, the baseball already does a terrible job of marketing to their younger audience and to growing their younger, the youth part of the sport too, to begin with. So you may as well spend some time instituting rules that will help make the game a little bit more exciting, because man, I love baseball just as much as you do, but those extra inning games are brutal.
They can be. I was actually teasing my wife earlier. She was talking about trying to leave work early, and I was like, you're the type of person that wants to get out of things early whenever possible. And then I said, when's the last time you were at a ball game and stayed past the 7th inning? And I got just the best shrug ever, like, who knows? And I was like, oh, that's the worst. Like,
probably me.
Exactly. I'm all about running the deep. Like, we're going to get here an hour before and watch batting practice. We're going to stay until, like, post game is over, because you'll see my dumb face jumping up behind the camera. Like, it's all there.
So I'll say this. I'm not down with the batting practice thing. And on most things, aside from like sporting events, it really just depends on what's going on, right? So if I go to a basketball game and the team I'm pulling for is winning by 30, I'll even beat the traffic early, because you know what? They're probably still going to win the game if they don't.
Sure.
Sucks, right? But baseball's different in that way for me. For the most part, really all sports in general, for the most part, I'll almost always stay, but I don't get there that early. I typically like to stroll in. Even if it's a little bit into it, I like to stroll in.
Man, I like being there for the intro, but part of it could be that, like, I like the ability to try to interact with the players, especially with the kiddos, because then it makes it more real for them.
Yeah.
And they're no longer just a name on a screen. And even if it's, a backup right fielder, if they got a ball from the backup right fielder, like, that's their favorite player for the next year.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, like,
a bunch of Mitch Moreland fans.
Oh my God, don't bring up Mitch Moreland. I hate you so much right now.
He just got traded, man. I don't have Mitch Moreland anymore. He was the best bat on my team.
Wait, where's he at now?
He went to San Diego.
Oh, really? Jeez.
Yeah, we'll get into some of the deals, like I said, here in a bit. But yeah, but that's the point, though, is nobody really knew who Mitch Moreland was.
Yeah.
I mean, made a name for himself because kids got excited about him. He's my wife's favorite player. Pretty crazy.
Well, Claire just went down in my book.
Yeah,
just kidding.
I get it. Well, it'll make you feel better that she was mostly a fan of him when he was on the Rangers.
It didn't make me feel any better. No, it's and you know what? All those guys who went from Texas to Boston and got their rings in Boston, power to them, hats off to them. Like, I don't fault them one bit, for going where, a chance to strike while it's hot.
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah, well, I don't know if Napoli really knew what he was walking into. That was sort of a lightning in a bottle type situation. But I'll take the ring regardless, and I'll give it to Mike Napoli because he deserves it.
Absolutely, he does.
Talk about a flame out of a career. Speaking of which, it's sad.
No, hold on. Tap the brakes, because he was a little older. Like, I feel like when he won, he was in like mid-30s, right?
Something like that. And he's not that old. That's what I'm saying. Like,
but when you're a catcher, you age faster.
Well, so he was only a catcher in Texas, and then they convert him to a first baseman in Boston, and /DH depending on the day.
Yeah.
And that's when he got enormous and was like cartoony big. And then when he got traded to Cleveland, and he either got traded or he signed there. I think he got traded from what I remember. That would have been in 2014. That would have been or 15. That would have been when they were cleaning house at that point. So, but he got hurt and just couldn't ever get back. And so when I say flame out, I mean it in the most respectful way possible. It's a shame that it didn't go a little longer for him.
I remember him in Boston. I have no memory of him going to Cleveland. I feel like maybe I read a news headline when he came back to Texas to retire as a Ranger or something, but
he did do that. I forget about that. Yeah. No, and he was hurt for a lot of the time. It was something like he got hurt, and then he was like he was out for the full year, and then fans can fact check me on this later on Twitter. I'm sure they will. They typically do. But it was something like he got there, he sat out majority of the season or whatever, and then was in spring training and got hurt again. And that was it.
Gotcha.
Strong guy. I love Napoli, and always been happy for that guy because he's one of those salt of the earth cats. But anyway. Okay, so we have trade deadline things to cover.
Yes.
We have Mets things to cover.
Yes.
Unfortunately, we don't have Jimmy Midtown. We'll hopefully try to get him next week if he can pop in. The Mets got sold, that's a big thing. And I think that Jimmy Midtown is it's not quite done yet, so he probably doesn't want to jinx it. Last time he came on this show when something good was happening with the Mets, it went to hell in a handbasket really fast.
I feel like Jimmy is in the room right now, like with the lawyers, helping to arbitrate this deal along to push it.
I hope he is. I really hope he is. But it's big news for the Mets, man. It really is. And so they've been for sale for a while, and they were for sale pre-COVID, and had decided that they were the Wilpons who have owned them forever. So it's a old man father, and then his son, who is I think Jimmy so eloquently put it several times, something to the effect of this isn't exactly as eloquent as Jimmy would put it, keep in mind, but something to the effect of like little son playing with daddy's toys, something to that.
That makes sense.
Something along those lines. But yeah, he and it's been a circus. It's always been a circus, and they have these things happen that are just unbelievable, and it wouldn't happen to any other team.
No, it is so Mets. And at first, when I started getting into baseball, I was like, why do people say that? Like, what a mean thing to say. But like in the last 3 years, Jesus Christ.
Well, and that's just the last 3 years. I saw something. I have to dig this up because it was so interesting, and I saw it after last season, and it was. I remember. I think maybe even Jimmy sent this to me, but it was a definitive list of things that they have messed up from only a business side, and only the things that were 100% fact, driven, not like. Well, they did this, and so it probably would have, this probably would have happened.
Right. No, this was based purely on the evidence.
Right. Like invested money with Bertie Madoff. Like, not good. And so it's really interesting. And I've asked Jimmy about this before. We've had this talk on the show before, and I know we've had this talk ad nauseum since I've known him about like what happens, like what, because I'm always fascinated by that. I think it's really interesting when someone has the kind of money, the billions of dollars it takes to buy a franchise, and somehow just continually stumbles upon themselves. And I think it's so interesting of how many teams think that they can, or like businessmen think that they can apply some of those same principles to owning a team.
But like, in all honesty, I have the outline of Texas on my shirt, but transition it to football. I mean, you live in North Texas. You've seen just all the little stumbling blocks that Jerry Jones has done to himself with the Dallas Cowboys.
Over and over.
They only won in the 90s in spite of Jerry Jones. Right. And then the instant he started tinkering, perpetual mediocrity.
One of the most brilliant business minds I've ever seen, period. He knows how to put his brand on everything. The NFL or any of the sports really wouldn't be where they are without Jerry Jones. That is a fact. That
100%.
100% fact. He is a terrible judge at putting a football team together. Terrible. And so it's one of those things, though, because it's not even that, though, because it's not like, oh, well, Jeff Wilpon, the son, was successful, and so he bought the team and is running it into the ground. It's that he's never had to worry about whether it's successful or not because they own the New York Mets.
Right.
But to me, it's always been super fascinating because, like, aside from making fun of them, which I love, but aside from making fun of them, it's really interesting to me of like how these things come about. And it's one of those things that Jimmy has explained to me that Jeff Wilpon just tries to do everything and he's not good at any of it. And so it just, so you have incidents like the other day where, so they have, and this is another one of my favorite things, but they have a GM, Brady Van Wagenen, who is Brody Van Wagenen, excuse me, who was a former agent and got hired as a manager or a GM a couple of years ago. And so first of all, that never tends to go well. And doesn't matter, just never tends to go well because inevitably they're always hired for the relationships with players that they have, but inevitably that doesn't matter anymore because
it's moved on.
Right. And so I've always thought that dynamic is interesting, and teams typically don't go that way. There's only one other GM in sports there was a former agent, and that's actually the GM of the Lakers. So it's very interesting that is very, very rarely used. So I do look to those things to try to understand the decision-making process. And, and not to say that he's not qualified or whatever, I don't know, but I don't know what specifically as an agent qualifies you to run a baseball team. I understand the other side of that, but I don't, so anyway.
Just because you're good at one, you're probably good at the other. But if you're good at the other, it doesn't mean you're good at one.
There's a pattern in all of this. That's the pattern.
Right.
There's a common theme here. Okay. So Brody there's part of this that is unbelievable. So we have these protests and things like that we're gonna actually dive into here in just a minute. But the other day, what day was that where all the teams sat?
It's
last Wednesday. So the Mets and the Marlins were the last team to play. And so they were the last team that was going to play that still had a decision to make of what they were going to do.
Right.
And so they came together, which I don't know if they really should have come together or not. That's probably not a great thing in the COVID era, but I love the spirit of it nonetheless. Came together, decided they were going to walk out onto the field. They were going to wait 42 seconds for Jackie Robinson, and they placed a Black Lives Matter shirt on the plate, and they all left. A great display.
Dude, not only did I like that on the social media, like I shared it out. Yes, I'm 100% tracking where you're at, but I think I know where you're going. So pull the Band-Aid off.
Well, so Brody was talking about that in a press conference with his mask on and everything, and it was in the Mets media room, and they were clearly getting ready to have the what would have been the post-game press conference, but it would have been the post-walkout thing. Right. And he's talking about Rob Manfred. And what Brody doesn't realize is that the cameras were live, and they weren't only just live, but they were live to the Mets website.
Okay.
So this was all being streamed, and you know how those things are when like a lot of times you're waiting for a press conference and waiting for the person to come in. So it's just like kind of like a lot of just sitting around. Everybody's getting settled. Everybody's getting in their place. Everybody's getting ready, and then whoever.
So he didn't think it had started yet.
Correct.
Got it.
So he's talking to a couple of people off camera that you can't see, and he starts saying something to the effect of, he essentially said that Rob Manfred wanted them to go out at 7:10 and do their protest thing and then leave, wait an hour, and then go play the game at 8:10. So that way they didn't miss a game because in all fairness, it's a 60-game season. There's not a lot of room for like makeup games. So I get that sentiment. It's not the point.
Right.
Not the point. Okay. So, all that being said, so Brody says all of this or whatever on camera and was like, when it comes to leadership, Rob, meaning Rob Manfred, the commissioner of Major League Baseball, just doesn't get it.
Yes. Oh, yes.
and that, like all of that, because he was sitting there saying basically like, look, like, the players decide that's what they want to do. This is what they're doing. And like, he doesn't get it. Okay. So this happens, right? Okay. So I saw this on Twitter and I was like, oh my God. And so this happens. And then after that, it comes out that was actually an idea from the Mets owner's son, Jeff Wilpon, and not Manfred at all, or so they say, I guess. And not only did Dad put out a statement, but Son put out a statement that were contradictory of each other.
Oh my God!
And in each of two statements, Brody's name was spelled wrong differently twice.
They couldn't even get it right in either statement. Holy God. So first off, I'm a huge sucker for a bite the hand that feeds type of story. So like huge props to the douchiest name ever with Brody Van Wagner or whatever his name is for chewing towards Manfred. Love it. I don't know if the Mets leadership were taking the fall, if it was the Wilpons who came up with the idea. It does sound like a pretty peak Manfred idea.
It does. I'll give it that.
Absolutely. But wherever it came from, then to have contradictory statements come out, it's so Mets.
It really is. And they never can quite get it all right. You know what I mean? Like they never, it's like you go to the store and you buy a nice new outfit, a nice new suit, and you just wear white socks with it. You're just missing one little piece, but it's an important piece, kind of thing. And they do this all the time.
What do you have against my socks, J-Mac?
Not a damn thing. I'm not even wearing socks. But I'm always continually flabbergasted by it. And it's like you take something that ends, and this all happens like right before they do it. So like it almost immediately kind of like this is what happens if you don't happen to catch this. Because I saw this on Twitter and I was like, I can't imagine what this is going to be. And I was not disappointed.
Yeah, someone's going to have a rough afternoon after they find out that they were live mic'd like that. It's incredible.
What kind of statement does it say when your boss can't even spell your name right?
Well, and if they both spelled it wrong but the same way, it's like, okay, that someone's going off the wrong word doc. But the fact that they both were probably like, how do we spell Van Horsenwagen? And they're like, oh, whatever, we'll just make it up as they go. That's terrible.
Well, and it also kind of just screams we're not on the same page. We're not writing the statement together.
Absolutely.
And it really is just, it's absolutely disturbing. Jimmy responded to it. I said, it sort of feels like the right didn't talk to the left before they decided to act. Also, misspelling your GM's name in both of your statements is absolutely incredible. And Jimmy's response was, and doing it two different ways in the same paragraph emphasized is so disrespectful and incredible.
Well, at that point, you almost wonder if it is a deliberate power move. It's like, I'm going to spell your name differently in every single time that I mention it.
But the fact that we're asking this question, which we're probably the only one asking this question, I'd be willing to bet because I've not heard that out there at all. But doesn't that kind of prove the point? Like you shouldn't really have to ask that question in the first place.
Right. Exactly.
You have to wonder is kind of the point.
I know how to spell J-Mac. You know how to spell Ben Baseball. We both know how to spell Sambino. So once again, open invitation. Brody, either Wilpon, come on this show. We are happy to talk to you and give you our forum to clear this up.
The Wilpons would not like me, I don't think. I'll just say that right now.
But you know what? To be fair, they are currently kind of still over your second least favorite baseball team from New York.
It's true. And I'll take the wins. That I'm impressed by because I think the thing that when I look back on their 2017 run against the Royals and all that, I think it was the Royals. And I mean, they lost in 6 or 7 games. Like it went the distance. The amazing part about that is that they succeed at times despite themselves. Yeah. I always think is incredibly funny.
Yeah. Like, because it's whenever it wasn't supposed to happen.
Correct. But the protest thing, man, I thought was really well done. I thought it was thoughtful. I think other teams should have spent more time thinking about it a little bit.
Yeah. So the first one that I found, so let's back this up, and props to anyone who's called it out. All these protests, they really started in the WNBA, but the NBA started doing it on Wednesday in full force and sitting out games and taking the, and like hockey caught on, baseball caught on. But one of the first ones I saw in baseball was where Milwaukee Brewers pitcher did the initials BLM like in the dirt of the mound and then pitched. So I thought that was like a pretty good thing.
Yeah.
And of course, this is all based on like what's going on in Kenosha, Wisconsin, as a result of Jacob Blake being shot 7 times in the back. Which, by the way, as far as protests go, did you see the clip? I saw it on John Oliver where the WNBA players, they were all kneeling, wearing shirts with fake bullet holes on the back.
Yeah.
Like,
dude,
holy, that's how you do it.
It is.
Hot diggity.
It wasn't as eye-catching as it should have been, but it was eye-opening when you saw it.
Oh, that was fantastic. Anyway, so no, I thought that the BLM in the dirt was really good. I really liked, until it was completely undermined by Manfred, Wagonins, or whomever, I loved the 42 seconds of silence, the Black Lives Matter jersey on home plate, and then piecing out. Like, that's the way to do it.
Mm-hmm. I agree, and I want to spotlight on the WNBA for just a second, because there's something that's not talked about enough. Very few people seem to be aware of this. I never hear this really talked about very much. And you know what? Sometimes you got to shove the WNBA into a baseball show. That's just how it goes.
That's
because
right.
You know what? We want to make sure that everybody gets the recognition that they deserve, sports or not. And so let me ask you this: are you familiar with Maya Moore?
I've heard the name, but I don't remember why.
So Maya Moore was one of the best players in the WNBA, and she found out in 2 off seasons ago, I think it was, that she came upon this case of this gentleman that was wrongfully accused and was sitting on death row.
Yeah,
and she wasn't an attorney, she wasn't anything like that, but she quit the WNBA. Or, just sat out the season to devote all of her time to helping this guy with his case.
That's fantastic. I have heard this. Like, she ended up not playing, right?
Correct. 2 seasons now, and he recently got the charges dismissed. And I mean, thanks to her. And I mean, she was literally, this would be Mike Trout, Bryce Harper, this would be Giancarlo Stanton, Aaron Judge, name your biggest baseball players in the world just saying, I'm going to walk away and help with this because this is the right thing to do.
No, it's huge. Like, that should be, like, I don't know what the different awards or accolades are. And I know she's not doing it for the awards or accolades, but like, that's your ESPN player of the year right there. That's right. That's someone who's, Kaepernick was willing to sacrifice his career. Maya Moore sacrificing hers. Like, that's the way you do it.
Yeah. I do want to just get your thoughts real quick. I mean, what do you think about the way the NBA handled it?
So I really like the way that they're doing it. I'm not super wild about the fact that that the players could only choose certain things to put on the back of their jerseys, but I get it. My issue with the NBA has nothing to do with any of the Black Lives Matter protests or the way that they're using that platform. My issue with the NBA are the double standards in regards to US and China, but that's not necessarily here or there.
Definitely a different conversation for a different show, but a very interesting conversation that is not had enough. So I agree with you in that sense. I love what they've done in the bubble. I think my worry has been that you put things like the words Black Lives Matter on the court and it starts to get just becomes part of the court and loses a little bit of its meaning. So I think post bubble, you have to figure out how you can do something like that and make it fresh and keep it front of mind, because just like anything else, if you watch it long enough, it'll just sort of become part of the baseball diamond that you see, so I worry about that. I don't think that's the wrong move, but I worry that it'll get whitewashed out that way a little bit.
Yeah.
Which, it's more worry about it longer term of how you can keep it forefront of mind than anything else. This latest thing, though, that they did, and I don't want to go too far into opinions on basketball because that doesn't really matter, but I think it's important to talk about the sports landscape and how they've all handled this differently, which I think is very interesting.
Yeah, and the whole juxtaposition between different leagues, I was thrilled to see Roger Goodell, the clown, admit that maybe he was wrong on Kaepernick. 4 years too late, but welcome to the show.
Yeah.
I do think though that there's, I talked about it in a meeting I was in today, where it's like, what are companies doing when it's not in vogue? And just because you say something, put it on your court or put it on your jersey, do your actions also, replicate it? And that's my question for everyone. And, I'm in a glass house throwing stones, and I understand that. But what I'm saying is just saying Black Lives Matter after George Floyd is murdered is different than saying it and be willing to sit and stand behind it whenever it's no longer trending.
Yeah, we've been through this with Ferguson and all that stuff before. Like, this is nothing new in that sense, which is heartbreaking in that way.
Yes.
And to be quite frank with you, I think what the NBA did as far as their little walkout or protest or whatever the other day was kind of bullshit, because it felt very disingenuous to me. It's like, okay, we're done with this. We're not, we're in the bubble. We're playing games here, and you know what? Like, this is all too much. I'm done for the season. And they have this meeting, and like a couple teams, Clippers, Lakers, said, I'm done with this. Then the next day they come back and be like, oh, well, I think we're actually just going to play on Saturday instead. It's like, okay, so those are two different things. Because, one, you had the opportunity to really make a mark here and say, we are not playing because of this issue, period. They had a big opportunity to make a mark, and they didn't do it. And that really bothered me.
So, yeah, but if you're swinging at a pitch, I can coach you on your swing as opposed to trying to convince you that it's worth swinging overall.
Sure.
And in this specific instance, I wouldn't call the Milwaukee Bucks sitting out, I wouldn't call that disingenuous at all.
I'm not saying it's disingenuous for the act of doing that, but what I'm saying is to sit there and make this big boohoo about how this thing's probably over and the team doesn't want to play and all that, and then to turn around and just go back on that, it makes it sound like, oh, well, we realized how much money we're going to be out, so maybe that's not a good idea. Versus now, to give them credit on the other side of this argument, I will say the things that they've done subsequently to try to follow up on it and working with their hometown organizations and things like that has been really good to see. It's one of those things, as a white guy, privilege, I don't have a lot of perspective here. But what I do have is the want to see things better and for it to be better and to try to do my part to make things better, to call things out whenever I see them. Not that I don't do that anyway, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think that's the least I could do, and then just listen. And it's one of those things where if I see something where it's like, okay, but this is not making change. Sitting out one game doesn't make change happen, and that's the part I have a problem with. I'm not saying they should have played it. I don't think they should have. I think they should have not played anymore.
So I hear you. Yeah. As your friend, I would potentially caution you to say that it could come across not the way you intend to tell someone how to protest in the, and I know that that's not what you're doing, but I would just caution overall, because especially since we have not lived the existence of historically marginalized and oppressed groups, to then try to say how this is or isn't impacting their emotional psyche, what would be potentially concerning. But I totally get what you're saying, where if you're saying, hey, if you're going to quit, pull the ripcord, make it happen, we stand with you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying.
I'm not telling anybody how they should protest or, and I understand the urge and everything to want to play. I'm just saying, if you're going to sit there and make it sound like you want to make this monumental change and you have the power to do that, use it. Don't run away from it when it comes to the moment, because they had a good moment there, I thought. Okay. Again, I'm not telling anybody how to do anything, because, again, I'm the least qualified person to be talking about this stuff. But what I'll tell you is, I would love to see actual change happen, and not us run into this thing where it's like, okay, well, we brought up the Ferguson thing a little bit ago. Nobody seems to be talking about that anymore, because we moved on to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And I hate to see it. I hate it. Yeah. That's all it really comes down to.
No, it's fair. Totally fair.
Anyway, I thought baseball did a really good job with this.
Yes, with the exception of potentially undermining themselves later on, but we don't necessarily know who did that.
To be fair, it was just on the Mets website. Who's on that website?
Exactly. Jimmy and no one. No, I also thought it was interesting, and I'd be remiss if I didn't bring it up. The entertainment world lost Chadwick Boseman this week, huge loss. But the baseball tie-in is one of his big breakout roles was playing Jackie Robinson in the movie 42.
Yeah.
And I've read lately that because Jackie means so much to so many people, like people would try to project that on to Mr. Boseman, and they would, he would try to be like, yes, I'm not your Messiah, but I will definitely like try to be respectful of the reverence that you have for Jackie Robinson. Try to wear, the jersey with pride, but also no, I'm a dude, an actor. Just it really made me like him even more after reading some of those stories, and definitely, not necessarily, sports related, but kind of tangential. Pour one out for not real Jackie Robinson.
Give him an applause. No, for sure. And it's more that he's taking the credit away from himself and focusing it on the issue that needs to be focused on. And that's my point too. Like, that's what I was kind of saying before, is that it needs to be focused on not one individual glorifying anybody. It needs to be looked at as an opportunity to get better and to change.
Yeah.
And he personified that. He really, a big loss for the acting community. All right. So do we want to get into a few trade deadline things?
I am so ready. And it's really funny because we mentioned earlier the Padres, and I had no idea about Mitchie Two Bags going to San Diego, because let's start in San Diego with Clevenger.
Yeah.
In San Diego?
Yeah.
Holy crap.
So I think a couple of things happened there. I think in Cleveland, so first of all, a 9-player deal. Love that.
Love it. Anytime you have more than 4, I'm in.
The Padres had several of those where it was like a 7-team deal or 7-player deal and 5 teams and stuff like that. But in this particular situation, so it's great for the Padres to add some good starting pitching.
Yep.
On top of that, it's a great time for Cleveland to sell, because they're just not, in the division they're in with the Twins, they're just, it's time to refresh the farm system a little bit where you can.
Yep.
Because you're going to be supplementing that with good money that you're going to spend on guys like Lindor anyway, so it doesn't really matter in that sense.
Well, Twins and the White Sox, who would have thought that the White Sox would be at the top of that division, August 31st? Not me.
And it's smart to understand where you are and to read that writing on the wall. So I get why they did that from a Cleveland standpoint. I get why they did this for a Padres standpoint. The most amazing part about all the deals that the Padres made, because they made several, which we'll talk about, is that they gave up something like, I want to say it was like 12 or 13 players, none of which were their top prospects.
See, that's incredible, because not only were they dealing, they were keeping some of their homegrown talent. And
Absolutely.
Realistically, that to me just shows how San Diego is pushing their chips to the center of the table. Because what people may forget is, if San Diego wants to have a snowball's chance in this thing, they still got to get through Los Angeles. And Los Angeles is a 5-game lead on them right now. Like, still, they're in a good spot. They're second place in the National League, but they still are second to the Dodgers. And that's going to be a heck of a playoff series, especially with this strengthened San Diego club. I'm super excited to see what goes in. And even if they don't make it all the way, at least for doing the types of deals that San Diego did this trade deadline, someone needs to get a bonus in that organization. Someone has definitely done their job well.
Ironically enough, the GM, AJ Preller, is John Daniels' disciple. So it's very interesting that he kind of put it together aggressively like that. But he they know how to do business, apparently. I think that the best way to describe this when I was making notes about deadlines, deals today, was big upgrade, reasonable prices.
Mm-hmm.
Perfectly encapsulates it for the
Padres. It's you get a quality pair of jeans on sale. You're not breaking the bank, but you have at least something to work with.
Right. The Rays. The A's got Mike Minor from the Rangers.
Yep.
For 2 players to be named later. A lot of players to be named later.
Well, it's because they don't even know who's on their roster. Everyone's deactivated.
The Red Sox had the same exact problem.
There's no such thing as a farm system anymore. Like, it's just names.
The Blue Jays got 4 different starting pitchers.
That's concerning, because any chance that you basically turn over your rotation and you're above 500, like, that's not bad. And they're in a weak division.
Right. It's not insignificant in the grand scheme of everything. So I mean, you see that they got Robbie Ray from Arizona. Arizona kind of had a little bit of a fire sale when it comes to pitching and some of their talent there. It makes sense just where they're at. They had Starling Marte. They didn't have any room for him. The Marlins are someone that could use him, so he got moved there. Lots of good stuff happening, but I think it's overall. I think the Diamondbacks run. They probably see the writing on the wall of where they are, and it's a good time to rebuild. This short season is a perfect time to cash in.
Yes, this shorter season is the optimal time for it. Plus, what's interesting, when this season started up in July, we were talking about how normally at the baseball trade deadline, you can tell who your buyers and your sellers are, but the margins are so much more thin this year because it's such a short season.
Yeah.
So the Diamondbacks, for example, and I'm glad you brought them up, yes, they're in last place in their division. They're still only, like a few games below 500. They're not in a good spot,
but they're not bad.
Yeah, they're a 400 ball club.
Yeah.
And not to say that a 400 ball club always has a chance, but in a longer season, if someone was 400 close to the trade deadline, okay, depending on the strength of the division, plenty of games left. You could see a team like that deciding to not, just throw a grenade.
Right. And I think that is super fascinating because you're right. There's a lot less room for debate and for, deciding what you have. So your ability to make quick judgments about players and what the composition of your roster is very important.
Yeah.
But I also think it's really interesting that you see some teams like the Astros, the Braves, a few others that kind of decided, we're just going to roll the dice, see what happens.
Yeah.
And we're going to roll with what we've got. I mean, look at the Astros. I mean, they've got Justin Verlander, who's hurt for the year. Their number 5 spots unsettled. They have 7 rookies in their 9-man bullpen. So they could have, that's a good team. Regardless of what's going on with them, it's a good baseball team aside from Jose Altuve. And, they really could have spiced things up and chose to sit tight. And Braves were the same way.
Well, and that's where, especially when the Astros are concerned, first off, middle finger to Osuna,
Always.
Whatever. But when it comes to the Astros, when it comes to the Astros specifically, they know that they still have the players to make a run possible. And if they're looking to see, hey, we're not going to make it happen this year, our race is not here, we've had some players sit out, whatever, let's still not tinker with it, not get rid of that because we could still make a run next year, especially with some of the volatility in the rest of the West.
Agreed.
Because you have the A's and then you have garbage.
Right. And that is, the A's are going to be fine. They're really, really good baseball team. The Yankees were another one I was surprised didn't really do much, especially with Aaron Judge, Giancarlo Stanton, Gleyber Torres, and James Paxton being hurt. But I mean, they're weeks away from returning at this point. So it's probably not worth doing. But I was surprised that the White Sox didn't really do a whole lot. They've got Gio Gonzalez. They've got some good pitching, but they don't have quite enough.
Well, they're playing with the house's money. They know that they're going to get some good eyeballs. They're going to get some long positions. But at the end of the day, they know it's the Twins division. They know that they're only 1.5 up and that they're not going to be there by the end of September. No sweat. Let's just enjoy the good thing. Try to sell some tickets, for the future and try and get some merchandising and go from there. Capitalize on it this way, but continue their 3-year rebuild that they were going through, or their 3 to 5 year trajectory that they were on.
Yeah, and I mean, that's really all I'm looking for from my team specifically. I mean, they traded some pieces, not enough pieces, I would say. I mean, my opinion was burn the whole thing all the way down, but, I get it. I don't know if that's necessary either, though. So there was some pitching they needed to move on from. But, I mean, the Red Sox sat on Martin Perez, which I was really surprised about. He's been fine. Ironically enough, he had at least going into this past weekend, he had a better ERA than Garrett Cole.
Yeah, but each of them have pitched, 7 times this year?
Yeah, but that's still the quill. I mean, it's not like the other one pitched a lot more than the other one.
No. I hear you. Anything can happen in 7 games.
But my point is that you capitalize on something like that.
That's true. Yeah,
just ram him down their throat and take a prospect.
No, that makes sense. But you knew even before the first pitch of the year was thrown, you knew that the Red Sox were going to be in a medium place, if not the cellar, because of God, who'd they give to Atlanta?
Well, so a couple of things happened. They traded Mookie Betts.
That's who I'm thinking of.
Dodgers, but that was
Dodgers. That's right.
That was him and David Price. That was your signal that this season's over, and they just didn't admit it like a bunch of assholes. But
right. That was before COVID, right? That both of those things happened. Well,
yep.
David Price, but
January. Yep.
Yeah.
February time, something like that. So like they had kind of thrown in the flag. I mean, the good news is with the trade deadline having passed today, we reset the luxury tax on across the league for every team for the year. So I mean, mission accomplished in Boston, the way I see it.
One day I will finally understand what all of this means from a business standpoint, but until then, I will not be the next general manager of the Mets.
Well, I mean, apparently you don't need that kind of experience, is what I'm told. Essentially, since you don't have a salary cap in baseball, they try to keep it as fair as they can by basically setting a soft cap at the top and saying, okay, every team has $217 million this year to spend in payroll before they start paying an extra tax on each dollar you spend over that threshold.
Yeah.
The problem is, as you go year over year over year, by the third year, you get to where it repeats. And once it starts repeating, you're paying $1 or $2 for every $1, et cetera, et cetera,
right.
et cetera. So like
it multiplies up and penalizes you. Like you can push over it, but if you think of maintaining over it, you're in a rough spot.
I mean, you can, but it's going to cost you a lot of money, and owners aren't willing to spend that. And so, which is infuriating, but that's just the cost of doing business in this league anymore, is what it seems like. And that's the incentive that you have on a soft cap. So anyway, that's kind of, so they're not going to be in the repeater because they played a season up to the deadline. So they're reset and they're ready to go to spend some money if they want to, but we'll see. We'll see. Okay.
Whereas Oakland is fielding a team, that they paid for with a box of Cracker Jacks.
Correct. And put it together brilliantly, I might add, Billy Bean as usual. All right. So that leading to that, I mean, the fact that the Rangers didn't move Lance Lynn, didn't move Joey Gallo. Joey Gallo, I can maybe understand. Maybe.
So Gallo's their linchpin for the franchise. Like they want to put his face on more billboards. They want to use him to sell tickets next year. They're going to sell tickets next year though because they have a brand new ballpark. Like even if you and I were playing for the Rangers next year, like they're going to have people in that stadium because it has air conditioning.
True.
My concern with Lynn is he was having a good year. Like, if you were going to get rid of him, this was the year for it. And because you got rid of Minor, you're signaling that, we're not riding this out.
Yeah.
So it's like, what the heck are you doing?
That's the thing. And so I'm fascinated by this lack of move because really and truly last year was the time. So the fact that they got to this year at all is incredible to me. As far as it's really a gift in that sense. I can't believe they didn't move him. I mean, it's a team-friendly deal. It's done after this year. I mean, he's pitching fine. He's pitching great. He's one of the only things they've really got going for them. And I'm shocked.
Lance Lynn and
whatever
nothing. Yeah, right. The bones of Shin Soo Choo. Like, I mean, those are what's happening at Globe Life right now.
And it comes down to, I mean, so I've heard a lot of talk about this being in the Dallas area. So it comes down to, I've never really understood and you always get two sides of people here. You have, whenever you talk about John Daniels, their GM, I personally think that he's hamstrung with what ownership will give him. That's what I think. But there's also the side that think he's just a bad general manager. I don't think that's true, but I think maybe that this time has kind of ended.
Yeah, it feels like that.
Yeah.
I think that in his defense, he made a lot of other good moves in the past when he had more freedom. Mm-hmm. And because he didn't bring a ring home in 10 or 11, he lost that freedom. And now he is unable to make the moves he would need to make.
Yeah, I would agree with that because there were a lot of times where they made very strange moves. I remember back, it was 2012, maybe it was 2012 because it was the Bobby Valentine season for the Red Sox, and I remember they traded for Ryan Dempster from the Cubs. The Rangers did. And the next year it was Matt Garza from the Brewers. And it just, those trades, they weren't that good of a team. And just things like that never made sense.
Right.
And they just kind of continue to not.
But he's the same guy who Cliff Lee in 2010 to get them over the hump after just missing the playoffs in 2009. Like, made perfect sense.
Sure.
He's the one who
most teams would be able to identify that, though, because that team was really good.
Yes. However, he was also the person who for years was courting Darvish in the Japanese leagues.
True. I forget.
So, I mean, like, he had a ton of stuff. And say what you want about Darvish now, there's rumors. What's that?
He was excellent in Texas.
He was excellent in Texas. He's actually having a pretty good year this year. There's talks now that had the Astros not have been cheating, he'd have a ring.
Yeah.
Because who's an off-speed pitcher in Los Angeles in that season?
Yeah.
Yu Darvish.
Very good point.
So, and you know, how would that frame how he's viewed? Like, Yu Darvish take exactly all of his stats, but add a ring to it, you feel differently about that guy.
You definitely do.
And so what I'm saying overall is JD did make the right moves, I think, when he had the freedom. And now he's handcuffed.
Well, and you got a brand new stadium, so they just spent a bunch of money on that. Well, allegedly, there's
I mean, that's the city of Arlington and the taxpayers, like you actually. I think your zip code's relatively close to that ballpark.
I'll give them credit. They did trade Robinson Chirino. They did trade Todd Frazier.
Yeah,
dude. The fact that they traded Todd Frazier back to the Mets when he just spent 2 years with the Mets and signed with them in free agency, only the Mets could let a guy go in free agency and then trade back for him in the regular.
So funny. It's like, not only are we not going to pay you now, we're going to extra pay for you later.
Correct. Correct.
That's what happens, like, when you chase down the waiter because they've already put your order in and you want to change it. And they're like, well, I still want the fajitas. And then you end up paying for 2 meals, one of which you didn't really want.
Dude, Jesus Christ. I mean, it's really true. That's the best way to describe it. All right, man. Any other big name things at the trade deadline? Not a whole lot. The Cubs acquired Cameron Maybin. Cameron Maybin is 57 years old, and he has been in so many different trades, and he's played. Pull up real quick on Baseball Reference. I'd be willing to bet you he's played for 12 teams.
Cameron Maybin?
Yes.
All right, let's see what's going on. Yep. So Cameron Maybin.
How old is he?
First off, he's 33. Like, when you said he's 57, I was like, what the heck are you talking about?
Look it up.
All right, let's see what's on Baseball Reference here. Let's get that.
It's a rounding error.
Yeah, you're right. 33 rounds into 57. All right, so I'm showing he's played for Detroit, the Marlins, San Diego, Atlanta, Detroit, the Angels, Houston, Miami, Seattle, the Yankees, Detroit.
11. Pretty good.
It's not bad.
I told you it was. What did I say? 12?
Yeah, and he just went where?
Well, he just went to the Cubs. So I guess
okay. So now it's 12.
I swear to God, I did not read that. I just pulled that out of my ass because I honestly thought at one point he might have played for the Red Sox, but I couldn't remember.
That's ridiculous.
It's unbelievable. That guy moves around like anybody.
Well, and you want to know why I feel old? Is he made his major league debut August 17th, 2007. That's like a year after I graduated high school. He has played for 12 professional baseball teams since I've been out of high school.
That's tough. That's tough.
It's not a good look
Puts your resume on blast a little bit.
For aging me.
All right. Any other things before we wrap it up?
No, I think that at the end of the day, it boils down to there's about 8 teams left. There's Tampa, the Yankees, the White Sox, the Twins, maybe Cleveland, Oakland, Atlanta, the Cubs, Dodgers, and Padres. Everything else is garbage. And you know what? We all deserve this because people won't wear masks.
They just won't wear them, will they? They really won't. All right, man. I think that's a great way to end it. Let's go ahead and get out of here.
Well, if you like what you're hearing, make sure to check us out. We are at sensiblyloud.com. Is that moderatelyquiet.com? Oh no. Oh no, that's sensiblyloud.com. Plus, we are all over your social media page, whether that's on Facebook, Instagram, or of course the good old Twitter. Make sure to check us out. Plus, we got plenty of other podcasts. Do you like basketball? Do you like reality television? Do you like other things? Well, we probably have something for you. So don't forget to rate, review, subscribe. That really helps us out. Huge props to J-Mac for producing this and every other episodes. Cannot believe we made it to episode 123. Incredible luck. Thank you all so much for listening.
We'll get to 4, 5, 6, we promise. We want to thank everyone for tuning in for episode 123 of the Outfielder podcast. We would like to thank all of our fans, Sensibly Loud Media, our sponsors, and those with the sharp eye to keep the runners close, grounds clear. Please keep patrolling that outfield. Big ups to Kevin Towers. Don't text and drive. We'll see you right back here next time on the Outfielder podcast.